Good afternoon, everyone. How are you doing? Having a good day? Last lecture of the day? Yes? Good. No, for some of you it's not. I'm really happy to see good numbers in the room, that not everyone chooses to just do the live stream. So I really appreciate you here. I think it makes it, the atmosphere is different when there are more people in the room participating. But if you do have to use live stream, you know that it's still there for you. So we are starting to get into the real meaty stuff. And if you thought the first lecture, lecture 2 on time value of money, was difficult, then from now on, it's just going to be like walking in a deep, dark forest. So that's why I'm telling you, if you nailed time value of money, it's just going to be like a walk in the park. So once you got down the present value, the future value, annuities, I can promise you, you'll have such much easier time in this course. And I've been posting these additional video tutorials which focus purely on calculations. And don't discard them as something you might want to watch later or when you're studying for the test. Really watch them during the week when we're doing that lecture, and at least try to watch it before you attempt your quizzes, because it would be covering the questions you're doing in the computational quizzes on Canvas. So they don't count towards your participation marks. You don't need to rush to watch it before Wednesday, but do find time to watch it before Fridays when your quizzes are due. So we're now starting to talk about mortgage loan structuring. Whether it's the immigration barracks in Dunedin, or workers' dwellings, or low-interest government loans, New Zealand government really championed home ownership. And they thought that it should be an aspiration for most New Zealanders, and that's why the government provided early on various programs to get people into home ownership. And homes, this is a basic human need. And for many of us, this is also going to be the biggest and the most important investment we're going to make in our lifetime. So decisions that we're going to make today are going to have implications 20, 30 years down the road from now. Mortgage loans, they really have been essential in unlocking this dream of home ownership. So this was my long way of getting around the importance of understanding how mortgage loans work and the basics of it. So this is today, we're going to look at the nitty-gritty details of mortgage loans. So we need to understand the basics. And when you really break down the basics of loan financing, you will see all the familiar time value of money terminology. You will come across the present value, the future value, payments, interest rates, term. So none of these should be new. You just need to know what terms are appropriate for which time value of money concepts. So the very first decision, and with loan, getting a loan, there is really, it's various decisions that you're going to make. And the very first decision that you're going to make is what loan amount you're going to take on as your debt. Well, that, of course, is going to be a function of the price you're going to pay for the house. So loan amount has a ratio referred to as loan-to-value ratio, and typically, these days, especially banks would require your upfront investment in the house, which comes in the form of your own equity. So the banks would want you to put in some of your own money towards buying a house. So the equity component of the purchase would be 20%, which makes the loan to value ratio 80%. But there are certain allowances for first-time home buyers where those types of buyers can get breaks and their loan-to-value ratios can be greater than 80%. So really, loan amount is the present value of the loan. So this is the first big sum, a lump sum, that the lender is going to give to the borrower. So that is given at the time period 0. From then on, that begins the life of your loan. So that is the present value. On the other end, you have loan maturity date. And maturity represents the time when the loan is paid off in full. And again, that also is associated with decisions that you're going to make. How are you going to take the pain of paying off that loan? Are you going to spread it out or put it off until the end? When you come to that very last payment, is it just going to be the same as all the other ones you've made in the years before that? Or is the very last payment will be very high payment that you'll have at the end? And that all is tied to the pattern of how you're going to amortize your loan. And amortization refers to the concept of paying off your loan over time. So in some cases, you will come to the loan at maturity, the loan balance will be 0. So over 20, 30 years, whatever you've chosen, you will pay it off completely, or at the end of, say, 30 years, you will still have an outstanding balance in excess of 0. So just as with and other decisions you'll have to be making is how long is that maturity? And maturity is a long-term commitment. And often, that commitment you are making to the lender can last longer than some marriages would last. On average, you're signing up, and it's a contract that you have obligations to the lender for minimum 20 to 30 years. So just imagine, especially with how modern times young adults really delay the time when they start their family. They really want to focus on their careers, and they get their first home maybe around in their mid-30s. And on average, people try to extend their maturity of the loans for as long as possible. So if you take out the loan when you're 35, just imagine that you will can say that I truly own that home when you're 65 and ready to retire. So it is a long-term commitment. And so during that time, as I already mentioned, you're going to decide how you're going to pay off that loan, what is going to be the pattern when you come to the end of the maturity. Are you going to have this one-off very high payment at the end, or are you just going to come to the balance of 0? So at the end of maturity, you're talking about the future value. So that's another label you can put, the time value of money label you can put to a loan problem. Another decisions you need to make about your loan is the interest rate. And interest rate will certainly have an effect on the repayments that you're going to be making on your loan. So we have choices. We can fix our interest rates, or we can go variable. Which one do you do? Which one do you choose? With variable interest rates, you're basically riding the market the same way. You just mirroring the market. Whatever happens to you. If interest rates go up, and you have chosen to go with a variable interest rate or floating interest rate, that will be reflected immediately in the interest rates on your loan. If you decide to have some certainty in your repayments, you will go with the fixed rate option. And this is what most home borrowers opt for, is fixing their interest rates. And when they're fixing their interest rate, typically that's for a 2-year term. But with interest rate comes risk. Really, deciding on which interest rate option you're going to go with is a gamble. Right now, it's very tempting to get that home loan because our interest rates are at their all-time low. And it even seems that banks are almost giving away their loans. Their interest rates below 4%. We haven't seen that ever. So that is very tempting, but you have to understand that they only promise you that rate for maybe 2 years. What happens after 2 years? Rates can go up 10%. They might go below what you have signed up for, but there are also chances that they can increase. And in 2008, 2009, we were paying rates in excess of 10% on our home loans, so it can happen. Can you still afford repayments on your loan when it's at 10% versus 3.5% or 4%? So you do have to consider that long term, that when you're signing up, even though a deal can be very sweet, it might turn sour later on. Let's look at some examples. So let's, for example, going through the basics, loan amount. You want to, in the current market, you decided, what the hell, I will deplete my KiwiSaver and I'll fleece my parents and I'll scrounge around a 10% deposit. And I'm gonna go for that average house and I'm gonna buy a house in Auckland for $850,000. Now, of course, these are average prices. And if you wanna live in a better area, you will have to pay more than $850,000. So let's just work through an example. Let's say we're gonna pay for a house has a price tag of $850,000. And we're a first-time home buyer, and we managed to get the bank to agree to give us a 90% loan-to-value ratio loan, which means at the moment when we just first bought the house, we own around 10% of it, and this is our equity in the house. This is the money we got from KiwiSaver and our parents and our own savings, whatever we manage to save by not buying coffees every day. We've put down $85,000. And the rest of it was provided by the bank. So 90% of it, even though your name is on the title, until you paid off every single penny of that loan, really banks have the first priority over that house. If anything goes wrong, they'll be the first in line to get the money from the sale of that house. So the bank owes 90%, but in return, they have supplied the rest of the purchase price, which is $765,000. So now say you went with the option that will allow you to have the most affordable payments, and you went with the option of a 30-year loan. And you decided to go with what the rest of the people are doing and fix your interest rate for 2 years. So on that slide, the 2 years, so let's say we're going to go with ASB is offering us a good rate of 4.49. If you had equity, if you had access to equity in excess of 85,000, if you had 20 or more percent, that makes more than 170,000. If you had this much money in your bank account, burning a hole in your pocket, you could get a rate that is 3.99. But all we have available is 10%, so we're going to have a rate of 4.49%. So within these assumptions, what we're dealing here, we know the present value of the loan. We know that it's for a term of 30 years, and its interest rate per year is 4.49. So nothing new what we haven't covered in the time value of money concept. What we need to know next is how much are we going to be paying to the lender. So you can see from the basics, we decided on the maturity of 30 years. We next need to decide what, at the end of that maturity period, how much are we going to still owe to the lender. And let's assume we're going to spread the pain evenly, and that means we're going to try to pay off the entire sum of 765 with a fully amortized loan, which means future value is 0. Our payments need to be designed in a way where we have enough principal and interest to pay off the lender during a 30-year term. So that would allow us not to owe anything at the end of the 30-year period. So once we have understood the basics, all you have to do is take out your calculator. Well, one other thing is how frequently are we going to pay our lender? And the more frequent your payments are, the more affordable your loan is going to be, because you're paying off your loan faster, and you're knocking down that principal. The faster you can reduce the principal, the less interest you're going to be paying to your lender. So let's say we're going to go with 12 payments per year. So monthly payments. With your calculator, we're going to set our calculator to 12 payments per year. Yeah, that's the first thing you do, 12 shift PMT. And after that, we followed up with all our assumptions. 30 years. Now, because we have 30-year loan, what we need to put into the calculator is how many actual payments we're going to make to the lender. And that's over 30-year period and monthly payments, that comes to 360. So that's, make sure it's 360 and not just 30. Our interest rate is at 4.49 and the present value of 765,000. Our future value is 0 and you solve for the payment. So for the next 2 years, we can plan that every month we have to come up with 3,871.60. That is every month. And at the end of 2 years, if you want to find out what would be the balance at the end of 2 years, if you watch the tutorial, you will remember the shortcut that I showed you. But basically, all you can do is do 2 shift N. So basically telling the calculator, after 24 payments, what is my balance? So after 2 years, you've knocked down about 25,000. So you have a balance of 739, 707.24. What if you are a very risk-averse individual and you hear a lot in the media and you've heard a lot of opinions that interest rates are going to go up? And you want to follow that advice and say that, well, I don't want to just fix my interest rate for 2 years. I'm going to fix it for 5 years. So I want to have that certainty for 5 years. But you can see straight away that if you decide to have that certainty for a longer period, you have to compensate the lender for that, to give you that certainty. Because I told you about the interest rate and the risk associated with the interest rate. Interest rates can go up or down. If you want to protect yourself from interest rates going up, you have to pay a premium. From the lender's perspective, they also want to protect themselves from the changes in the market for money. So that's why they're going to charge you a premium. So if you want to go with a rate fixing your interest rate for 5 years, you will have to pay a higher rate of 5.49%. So that's a 5-year term for which this interest rate is going to apply. So for a 30-year loan at 5.49 and fully amortized, you can see that immediate effect you can see in your monthly payments. You now have to come up with $4,338.79. And that is a difference of, so if we subtract our previous payment of $3,871.6, 467 extra per month you have to come up with. And you have to ask yourself a question, is that certainty worth to me? Is that security of knowing that for 5 years my interest rate is not going to change? If that security is worth to you $467 extra per month, then perhaps you should go with the 5-year fixed rate. Do realize that over a 5-year period, because you have committed to pay this level of payment for 5 years, if we multiply that by 60, over 5 years you will pay $28,000 extra, just for having that security of fixing your payments. What would be a good way to looking at this? You know, as with interest rates, you're taking a gamble. You don't know what's going to happen. It's your best estimate of what's going to happen in the market and how you feel about which way the interest rates are going to go up. And we don't have a crystal ball to look into the future and know exactly what's going to happen with the interest rates. So a useful way to look at it is to look at the past. We can, of course, have the perfect knowledge of the past and see exactly what happened. Let's look at this scenario where you're sitting in July of 2014. You decided to buy a house and you paid $850 for it, and you put down a 10% deposit, so you have a 90% loan to value. And in 2014, prices were going up, and it was very likely that you would have paid a price of $850 even in 2014. Now, if you go to interest.co.nz, you can look at historic interest rates going back 10, 15 years. So in July of 2014, if you were sitting there and making a decision, do I fix my rate for 2 years or for 5 years? And you know, the interest rates were, house prices were going up. Everyone saw that. And Reserve Bank of New Zealand, this is our main regulator of the financial market, they kind of saw that, and one of the instruments they have to regulate house prices is to change official cash rate, which would have an effect on the interest rates. And for one way of cooling down house prices is to increase that official cash rate, which would have an effect on the interest rates you pay on your loan. So if in 2014 you were sitting there thinking, well, house prices are going up, do I fix my rate for 2 years or for 5 years? And I hear a lot of talk that the interest rates are going to go up. Well, if you decide to go for 2 years, at that time, average rate in July of 2014 was 6.35. You can expect it, of course, for 5-year pay a premium. In 2014, you would have paid 7.32%. Fast forward to 2016. Your 2-year term would have expired and you would have refixed your interest rate. You would have refixed your interest rate, and in July of 2014, it was 4.42. So if you gambled that interest rates are not going to go up, certainly a 2-year fixed rate was a really good choice in 2014, because in 2016, your payments are going to go down significantly of the low interest rate, whereas somebody who was very risk averse and went with a rate of 7.32, they could only break their loan agreement. In fact, they still have to sit and wait for a few more months until July of 2019. And that person, that home buyer who fixed their interest rate for 5 years, they had to sit and really kind of blame themselves that, you know, those other people can have a rate of 4% or less, and I'm stuck with this 7.5%. So let's say in 2019 in July, they would get their 5.5% or so. So you can see this, it's a really, decisions about loan and are very, there are a lot of choices, a lot of decisions that can have big impact on what happens during the term that you have that loan. It all starts off with your loan to value ratio, payment frequency, amortization period, maturity date. You know, the longer you extend, the lower your payments are going to be, but that means more interest you're going to pay to the bank. So understanding all of these basics is really important in making sensible decisions. As I said, buying a house is going to be the most significant investment that you're going to make in your lifetime. So if when making that decision, you don't want to, you know, you want to make an informed decision rather than just go with your gut feel. Although sometimes gut feel pays off too. How can you make your loan more affordable? If you want to reduce your payments and you have no really choice of what the interest rate you can pay on your loan, if you want to reduce your payments, you can extend the maturity date. If you pay, say, instead of monthly, you go with the fortnightly option, you will pay off your loan faster. If you go with different amortization patterns, so within our choices, we have a fully amortized loan, so you pay off everything during the term, come to the future value of 0, versus, say, negatively amortized loan, where you come to the future value that's even greater than what you started off with. Your payment levels will change with the amortization pattern. So it will be the highest with the fully amortized loan and much more affordable, say, if you go with an interest-only option. when we are making our payments, where does this payment go? Let's look at this example that we just looked at. We have let's say we have gotten that loan of $765, and we're making payments of $3,871. Let's just do some quick maths. 3871.6 times over 2 years, it's 24. Well, we've paid to the lender $92,918. And how come we came to the balance of $739? So if I subtract that from 765, why is my balance not $672,081? Why is that? Why? Would it be more fair? Or why is there such a huge difference between what we actually owe the lender at the end of 2 years, $739, versus the total amount that we've paid to the bank, $90,000 something? Where is that big difference coming from? We actually only paid off $25,000. You have some ideas, Jason? That is a good yes. We can never apply the whole payment that we have sent to the bank towards reducing our principal. Number one rule is that the lender will want to collect first and foremost all of the interest that is owed to the lender on the principal or outstanding loan amount. That is their first thing that they're going to use that payment for, is towards repaying the interest. Only if anything else is left from that payment will it go towards repaying of the principal. If there is nothing left, that would be the case of an interest-only loan, for example, where 100% of your payment goes simply for compensating the interest charge on your loan. And you don't reduce your balance whatsoever. So whatever you started with 765, 2 years down the track, it's still 765. How is that possible? Well, you had an interest-only loan. So if you want to understand what is the balance of your loan, well, you have to remove the interest component from the payment. And in the early years of the loan, that interest component is going to be very significant because you're paying a lot of interest on large loan balances. But as you go down close and closer towards your maturity, your loan balance gets smaller and you pay less interest, and more of your balance, of your payment, can go towards repaying your outstanding balance. So remember that within your payment, first thing, interest. Second, principal. What are your options in terms of paying off your loan? Do you want to keep paying off the same amount of principal during the whole time that you have that loan? Or do you want to keep the same level of payment, which in that case you won't really know for sure unless you do calculations, but you won't know how much goes towards interest versus principal. So this is where we have the two loan types, where one is, and it is the most common type of the loan. It's called constant payment mortgage loan. It is also called table loan. And you know, a table has a flat surface. And that table loan refers to the level of payment that you're making during the term of the loan. So during the whole time that you have your loan, you have the payment that's level. It's always the same, which means the components of the principal and interest vary over time depending on what is the outstanding loan balance. Whereas with the reducing pattern, the thing that is fixed is the amount of principal that you're paying off every time you're making that monthly payment. Since the principal component is the thing that's fixed, on top of that, you're adding the interest that you owe to the lender. And because your balance is going to change every month as you pay off that balance, the payment is going to reduce as well because you owe less and less interest, but that principal component is always the same, how much goes towards reducing the principal. So you might be paying off $500 every month goes towards reducing that principal. So to calculate a payment on a constant amortization mortgage loan or reducing loan, you can't use financial functions on your calculator. Why? Good, that's right, Bianca. Payments, what time value of money functions, the payment function assumes that it's an annuity. And what is an annuity? An annuity is when you have regular payments that are made at regular time intervals, but they're also, the amount is fixed. So we can only use our calculator, and thankfully, most of the loans we're going to be coming across in our course and in your life are going to be the table loans. So we can use this thing here. Otherwise, if you're asked to calculate payment on a constant amortization mortgage loan, it will be told to you specifically, say, what is the first payment? What is the 25th payment? What is the 60th payment on a reducing loan? And every time you have to do that calculation again. Whereas with a table loan, it doesn't matter. It's always going to be the same, whether it's first or 21st, it stays level. How do we find out what our balance is going to be for maturity? And in New Zealand, on average, houses are sold every 6 years. So even though the maturity of the loan might be, so the term over which we're amortizing our loan and the payments are calculated is based on a 20 or 30-year term, in reality, we are most likely going to repay that loan much sooner than 20 or 30 years. So we do need to know what the balance is going to be before maturity. So that is a question of what is the future value of your loan. Balloon loans, that is when balloon loans are the loans that have high outstanding balance at the end of the term. And in New Zealand, because we have these fixed interest rates, pretty much all loans in New Zealand are balloon payment loans, because at the end of the fixed term, we have an option of paying off our loan completely, refixing our interest rates, or go variable. So that's why every 2 years or every 5 years, whatever frequency you went with to fix your interest rates, you're signing a new agreement with the lender. And every time that term comes up, it's a balloon loan. How much you pay off during the term, that goes back to the amortization and what is do you go with interest-only balance, interest-only loan, then you have a present value equals to your future value. Are you going to go with the fully amortized option? That means present value is 765, for example, future value is 0. And that means you have to know, depending on the amortization function type of your loan, what is going to go into the future value. Most of the times, it's just going to be 0, so you can just leave it. Don't need to even enter anything in the calculator. It always, by default, assumes that it's 0. But if it's something different, you have to make sure that you tell the calculator what it is. So knowledge is power, and arm yourself with knowledge and what these basics that we just discussed of the basics of the loan: amortization, payments, interest, terms, and so on. Bits on pay and accrual rates. Well, I won't spend too much time on it, but basically pay rates refers to, pay rate is a ratio between your payment and the original loan amount. And the accrual rate is your annual nominal interest rate on your loan divided by the frequency. We're still going to do Kahoot. So I'm just warning you, in the next few minutes we're going to do it. All right, you figure it out. So accrual rate is the ratio between the, yes. Yeah, accrual rate is the ratio between the nominal annual interest rate and the frequency of your payments. And when you know the pay rate and the accrual rate on your loan, you can understand the amortization pattern. When the pay rate is greater than the accrual rate, you know that your loan is positively amortizing, so you're going to come to a balance of either a 0, which is fully amortized, or partially amortized. If your accrual rate equals to pay rate, you know that you have an interest-only loan, 0 amortization. When pay rate is less than the accrual rate, well, that's when you know that you don't pay enough interest on your loan. And when you don't pay enough interest, all of that shortfall that you don't pay to the lender gets put back onto your original loan amount. So you end up with a negatively amortized loan, which is, you come to a future value that is greater than the present value. So let's spend now the last few minutes on Kahoot. Remember about using your UPI, please. All right, so we have a good number. most of you have been listening very carefully, and the blue one is the correct one. So amortizing loans require repayment of principal and interest. Pay rate is greater than the accrual rate, and payment can be fixed or variable interest rate. So the only option that's left there for us is that all of the loan is repaid with the last payment. That would be the case of an interest-only loan, for example, that didn't amortize. So this is that tricky question. And every year on the test, I do get surprised with this one sometimes. I don't know if you just plain want to be smart, Alex, or you really don't know. But the answer to this, of course, is false. At least slightly majority wins on that. I'm glad. I showed you the example where you cannot just apply the whole payment to know how much balance you've paid off over time. There is always, first and foremost, is interest that has to be removed. Only anything else left over goes towards repaying the principal. And we have the same winner from last time. Very good. You weren't listening carefully, and in this case, the remainder of the balance of your payment is applied to principal, not to the interest. So again, first you take interest and the remaining balance is applied to principal of the repayment. So the answer is false in this case. It needs to be switched around. Wow, this person is on fire. Let me find out who that is. They're in the class today. Let's see if Bronson can do it again. Yes. Thank you. So if you know within each payment how much goes towards principal interest, you need to make a loan amortization schedule, which breaks down every single payment. If you have 360 of them, you can go and look up payment number 359 and how much went towards interest and principal. It's all within loan amortization schedule. So the picture of the table was there to confuse you. But a loan where the repayment of principal remains constant, that means every month you know how much principal is repaid, that is in a reducing loan. Constant amortization loan, reducing. It's CAM, yes. It is the blue one, which was chosen by the minority of the participants today. Yes, I can go away from today's class knowing that you learned something. It's true. It is true that as you pay off more of your loan, the greater proportion of that goes towards repaying and reducing your balance. So principal loan amount is also the original loan amount. Yes, so it is present value of the annuity when we have constant payments, of course. And our last question. So the pay rate, you saw that it's the monthly payment, so it can we have just a few more minutes of attention? So with a monthly, if it was an annual payments, then it would have been the option that 42 people have chosen is 0.12. But because this is monthly payment, and with an interest-only loan, we can just take the annual rate and divide it by the number of payments you have per year. So it's 0.12 divided by 12 is 0.01. So answer is the green one. Thank you. Friday is your computational quiz due. If you have questions, let me know.
Technical difficulties, no.
Yes.
That's right. So could I get the participation?
Okay, you need to write down your name.
On this paper?